Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today or good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you're from. I am Emma Parker, and I'm the project manager at the Quilt Alliance. Thank you again for joining us. We are so excited to share another fantastic QSOS interview that stands for Quilters Save Our Stories today with Casey Engel, conducted by Kimberly English. Many of you know, some of you, it might be your first Textile Talk, many of you have been joining us for years, but Textile Talks is a weekly series presented on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern in partnership with the Quilt Alliance and 3 other partner organizations, which are shown here. All Textile Talks are recorded and available via YouTube, and we will put the link for the Textile Talks YouTube recording playlist in the chat box now, in case you want to revisit any of our past Textile Talks. About the Quilt Alliance, one of the 4 partners, our mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers. So lofty goal. Today, we're going to present a demonstration of our longest running oral history project, Quilters Save Our Stories, or QSOS, which is a collection of oral history interviews with quilt makers archived with our partners at the Library of Congress and the University of Kentucky. To find out more about the Quilt Alliance and the QSOS project, you can visit our website, quiltalliance.org, and we are a member-supported organization, so I encourage you to consider becoming a member or a donor. We rely on this kind of community support to help carry out our important mission and do projects like this interview. First, just a little housekeeping. You can use the chat box for greetings, comments, or if you need technical help. There's also a Q&A box to enter your questions for our speaker. Casey will be joining us live after we show a pre-recorded interview. So if you do choose to send a chat, just double check the settings before you send and say whether you want to send it just to presenters or to everyone, if you'd like to share your comments with everyone who's attending. You can also turn on live captions by clicking on the live transcript or CC button on your Zoom controls. And you may need to exit if you're on a mobile device to the Zoom settings and then rejoin the meeting. Just hunt around for your caption settings. And this interview is pre-recorded, so you feel free to adjust the volume on your device as needed. We'll try to make sure it's loud enough for everyone to hear, but if you have a hard time hearing, you might want to grab a pair of headphones. Our interviewee today is quiltmaker and artist Casey Engel. Casey is an interdisciplinary artist working primarily in textiles, printmaking, and ceramics. In 2015, she earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she's worked at various fine art print shops and galleries, and also exhibited in galleries and art centers across the country. Currently, Casey works from her home studio in Asheville, North Carolina. Woohoo! And in addition to her personal practice, she is also the exhibitions coordinator at Blue Spiral 1 Gallery in downtown Asheville. Casey was interviewed by Kimberly English, a friend of Casey's and a fellow artist. Kimberly is a weaver with an undergraduate degree in textiles from Savannah College of Art and Design and an MFA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Heels. She has held residencies at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, the Bascom Center for the Visual Arts, and the Praxis Digital Weaving Lab. Kimberly also lives and works outside of Asheville. So I hope that you'll check both Casey and Kimberly out online. We'll share links to their social media and websites in the chat as well. And a quick note about QSOS project before we begin. It was launched in 1999, and it's not only the largest collection of interviews with quilters, but it's also the largest grassroots oral history project of its kind in the entire world. So we are thrilled and honored to have Casey share her story for inclusion in the QSOS collection. We'll listen to her interview now, and after the interview, we'll have a very short Q&A. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box throughout as you think of them, and we'll curate them and collect them for our live Q&A. But if other things come up while we're doing the Q&A, feel free to share them. Just put them in the Q&A box instead of chat, because sometimes things will get a little lost in the chat box. All right, we'll get this queued up. And we'll hear from Kimberly and Casey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly English, and today I am interviewing Casey Engel for the Quilters Save Our Stories project. And today's date is October 16th, 2023. I am really delighted to be interviewing a dear friend and an artist that I admire so much for this project. So thank you to Amy and Emma for inviting us to have this conversation today, and thank you to Casey for sharing your work and your practice with us. I know that quilts are a really personal and sometimes vulnerable thing to talk about, so thank you in advance. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. Casey, can you just start by telling me a little bit about your creative practice and what led you to quilts?
Absolutely. So I kind of stumbled into quilts truly only, I just had my 1 year quiltiversary in May. So I'm fresh on the scene with all of the enthusiasm, but my background is in interdisciplinary arts, but most of my focus was on printmaking and ceramics, working functionally in ceramics and sculpturally. And quilts came about from actually me wanting to make my own clothes. And I had so many people that tried to teach me how to sew. My grandma, my mom in college. I mean, my husband did every single sewing project for me when I was in school because I just like could not. And it just like one day I was like, I want to know how to make my own clothes. And I taught myself how to sew without the foot pedal at first because I was super overstimulated by having to really, I was distracted by the needle. I was like, what's going on with this needle? I'm really scared of it. It's so fast. It's so loud. Like it scared me. So by eliminating foot and hand, I was able to kind of very slowly build up my courage with this machine. And I will say now I use the pedal and it is full steam ahead. I am not afraid anymore. But they came from really responding to all of this scrap material. There would be these really interesting negative cutouts from a shirt. And from my ceramics background, I work with slab construction. So I'm working with flat patterns, and that translated so perfectly into sewing. And those shapes and the materials that I was using, I was like, I gotta put these things together and see what happens. And I love slow processes. And it really, I don't know, does it get slower than hand quilting? I don't know, but the pace of the machine and the slow, thoughtful handwork was just like a match made in heaven for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about kind of the intersection between ceramics and fiber and kind of how your sensibilities towards both kind of emerged in that way. I think that's really interesting to think about. I haven't thought about that with your work. Can you talk a little bit about your design process? Like, are you planning your quilts? Are you working more improvisationally?
So, a combination of both. I feel like there are two quilters living inside of me, and one of them is the improv quilter. Like, I love, again, like using scraps and seeing like how can I like fit this weird little puzzle of my own design together. It's so intuitive. I mean, the only rule in my improv practice is like I gather a bundle of fabric that I think tells a story and we'll go off of that. The other quilter is, I don't know, I refer to her as the painter. And that is like where I'm going out and sourcing specifically tablecloths that are usually, I don't want to spend more than $10 on them, no matter how big they are. Like, I want it to be very inexpensive, and I'm really picky. It can be any color because dyeing is a really big part of my practice. And that is where it takes the front seat in these whole cloth quilts, where they feel very painterly because it's like a solid field of color that I'm then either responding to like the natural pattern that's existing in the cloth, and by dyeing it, there's something that was revealed to be responded to. And in those, I tend to like what I would refer to as like stitching with drawing. Like the composition ends up becoming fully about the hand quilting.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about your material sourcing. I know you just mentioned tablecloths, but I know that you've used a ton of different secondhand and vintage fabric pieces, and I know that's like a really integral part of your process. So can you just talk about that interest a little bit more?
Oh yeah. It's a huge part of my practice. I mean, like I said earlier, it's how everything kind of sparked, but I mean, I'm exclusively at this point, I mean, like forever is a long time, but at this point in my life, I'm very interested in textiles that have existed in the home and they've had a functional life. And the quilts that I'm making, they're not functional. They're not meant for the wall. Or they're not, excuse me, they are meant for the wall. They're not meant to be used by a person. And that's very different for quilting. I mean, I'm the only one that is ever going to experience them on top of me, as I'm a lap quilter. I do work on a table, but mostly they're sitting on top of me. And I like the tension that they have already served humans in the way that they were meant to, by covering a table or like a bed sheet or a pillowcase. Like they have experienced that level of intimacy with humans, and they're going to spend that last part with me and then be hopefully glorified on a wall. But yes, I'm exclusively interested in like napkins, bed sheets. Tablecloths specifically have been an interest of mine. There's something about like, I really love thinking about the life of these cloths, like a very dainty, fancy linen tablecloth, like were there two women sitting next to each other, like drinking tea, or like was someone just having like a very formal like morning and writing notes to themselves? Like, I don't know. There's a sense of mystery for me with them that I want to memorialize.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really interesting to think about kind of this classification between like private quilts and public quilts, and how you're kind of glorifying these really modest, used functional scraps and kind of elevating them to be this like art object. Um, Following up on that and thinking about your process, I am dying to know about your time in the studio. What do you listen to when you're quilting, if anything?
So there's different phases, and I've kind of dialed this in recently because I'm simultaneously working on 6 quilts at once. So I've been, which is like, I know that's a little bit unhinged, but it is actually working for me like better than ever. Like it really has given me this ease in the studio. Like there's always something to do, and it's suits my, like I can just lean into whatever my mood is that day. But when I am working on the machine, I do all, unless I'm working with a whole cloth, it for the most part is machine pieced. And when I'm on that sewing machine, it is party time. Like I like music is playing so loud. I mean, there's a big variety, but I am kind of a albums girl. Like I will listen to a single album kind of like over and over and over for a period of time. Like that might go on for like days or weeks. And I have like very specific albums and artists that I'll be kind of like following through a series. However, when it switches to quilting, that's when all bets are off. Like I will usually like warm up and listen to music for about an hour, and then like I think my mind is a little too busy with the stillness, and I just am like craving some sort of like stimulation or something cozy. And to me, what is cozy is Real Housewives. And I really, really love watching Real Housewives. I have a lot of cities that I'm following, and I quilt to that most of the time, kind of on repeat. Like I've seen seasons multiple times, and I was talking, I will not out the artist who also shares this treasure, but she also does really, really meticulous, laborious work. And I remember asking her at an opening, like, I have to know what you're doing in the studio. Like, are you one of those artists that's just operating in silence and it's like a spiritual experience, or like, are you just putting on what you have to do to get through the day? And they told me they also watch Real Housewives. And I think that there's something to do with like, I don't know, maybe a little voyeurism with me. Like I like that someone's in there and like they're not watching me, but there's voices. And then it also is crazy formulaic. Like it's the same thing over and over and over again. And I find a lot of entertainment and comfort in it. And some days, like I love hand quilting, but there are some days that it's tough for me because my life is a very fast rhythm at this point to settle into the slowness. Like some days it's easier than others, and I do really lean in, but on days where I cannot slow my frequency down, but I still want to quilt, like that is what gets me through the day.
I love that. I also share that interest in watching trash TV in the studio. So like it makes those long, laborious days go real quick. Um, Speaking of tedious pieces, I'm wondering if we can jump into your touchstone quilt. Do you want to talk about that work?
Yes, Gatekeeper. That piece was made at the same time as another quilt. I do like to think of them as sisters because they like shared the studio, and I was fussing over both at the same time. And Gatekeeper's sister is Pathway. But I had a prompt from the gallery I'm represented by and am the exhibitions coordinator at Blue Spiral. We were hosting an ambidextrous show where each artist is working cross-disciplinary, so they work in multiple mediums. And the director, Michael, he asked me, he's like, have you ever suspended a quilt before, or like thought about it in the round? And when he asked me this, I was like still pretty new, but like fast and furious in quilting. And he gave me that prompt at the right time, and it really made me consider quilts definitively as sculpture. And Gatekeeper is, like, along with Pathway, one of the first that I would really consider like the quilt as a sculpture fully in the round. So both of them were suspended from the ceiling in the gallery, and you were able to walk around, and they both relate to each other front to back in different ways. Gatekeeper, I was really thinking about two things. Some of the quilts that are my absolute favorite, 9 times out of 10, I love the back more than the front. And I love when there is almost this whiplash when you're looking at, sometimes the back of the quilt is so loud, but also quiet, that you're like, how is this the same object? There is this element of surprise. So I was thinking about, I don't usually think about the viewer, but in these, I was thinking about the viewer's experience and how they would engage with them. And I wanted you to, so the front side of the quilt is what I call the ladder side. And it isn't necessarily the front, but it's how I wanted people to experience it at first, because it's very atmospheric, it's quiet, it's really very minimal, like almost like a whisper. And then when you look over to like how I had installed it as the back, it is like full improv. There's so much energy, there's a lot going on, it's incredibly playful. But I was hoping that as people would be curious, hopefully, to walk around to the back, they would be like, what is this cool? This is wild. And that one is one of the most emotional pieces I've ever made. I think part of that was heightened by a deadline, and it was the most amount of labor I've ever put into a singular object. But it also was like entirely natural dyed. Like every scrap of fabric was dyed by me. I used Kutch, weld, indigo, iron, tannin. Like I was just using tannin as a mordant and like really making the color like this kind of like sad green brown. And I had been dyeing that fabric for, gosh, like I think I started in September the year before, like just gathering scraps and like just trying to see what different colors that I could get. And on the ladder side, like that was like tear city. Like I think I cried the entire time I was working on the ladder side of that quilt. It was a bed sheet, and one of the things that I love about dyeing is mystery stains. Like the ones that surface and surprise you, you just have no idea that they exist until you add even just commercial dye can completely change it and reveal all its secrets. So I pinned everywhere on that side where there was like a little stain or an imperfection, and I did like a tiny stitched drawing. And it just was like, that was one that I did the ladder side in silence, which I haven't ever done that before. Maybe that made space for a lot of feelings and tears. But like, it's very fitting because the improv side of it is like joy, like it is visual joy, and it was so much fun to do. And I loved, I mean, this body of work also for practical reasons sparked my interest in hand tying, which I like love hand tied quilts. Like they are, I mean, I don't know. I think quilters would agree that they're kind of traditionally like the lowest of the low. They couldn't be, you know, more basic in their construction, but that's what I love about them. And the first quilts that I had experienced, like, weren't necessarily blankets. They were blankets that folded down into a pillow that my grandma made. And I never would have thought of it as a quilt, but I was looking at it the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, it's 3 layers. Like, and she tied it. Like, it is a quilt. And I love the ties as sculpture. Like, there's so much to play with. I mean, they could be long, they could be short. So in Gatekeeper, there was so much going on that I wanted them to be like really tight and kind of, I don't know, almost look like these little flies, like buzzing around on like a picnic day or something. And but in Pathway, I exaggerated them and they were like very long. I used this linen thread. They're super spidery. And Pathway was different from Gatekeeper in that it was meant to be experienced as a singular object. The top of the cloth, which is a tablecloth, was shibori dyed. And I wanted to not only show that the quilt is two-sided, but that indigo is also two-sided. And so I cut a hole in the back of the quilt and like framed a little window of the indigo.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that deep dive on these two amazing quilts. Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm glad that you talked about the hand tying because I feel like that was something that you were like, should I do it? Should I do it? And then you did it, and you did it in such different ways on the quilts that it really complements the way that you were thinking about the construction and the grid and the lack of the grid. Yeah, they're two really amazing pieces. Can you talk a little bit about the work behind you? I see similarities between them, but I also see connections with the work that you just spoke about. I'm wondering if you just want to share what you have up.
Yes, I'd love to. These are like very, very fresh. I am in the middle of preparing for a solo exhibition at Converse University that will open February 1st of next year and be up for a month. And these are two quilts that I just finished that are in progress. They're just quilt tops for now. But this one over here is entirely made of garment remnants of the yardage that I'd ordered for myself to make clothes out of. And there was these one pair of pants that sparked this, and I had got them from she makes handmade clothes. Her name's Poem. I love, 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 love their garments. And I got these for such a deal and they never fit me right. And it always like broke my heart. And I was like, well, gosh, what if I felt so conflicted about cutting them. I really, really did. But what I ended up doing is, as a trade, I said, okay, if I'm going to cut someone else's pants, I need to cut and sacrifice one of my shirts that I've made. But I ended up sacrificing 2 because I did a little extra. And this one actually, and I'll show, has pockets of the pants on both sides. And I think I'm going to put change in them at some point. Like, I think it's just begging for a jingle, like some lost pennies or something. But I actually don't at this point, I don't know what its name is, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to quilt it. I'm not going to tie it. I know that. I'm going to quilt it, but I'm not exactly sure how yet. Like sitting and staring is a huge part of my practice. I mean, I am quite impulsive, but like I really, if I have the time, I really want to take my time with these quilts. And, you know, if I can be too reactive, I'll get myself in trouble. And usually that also will result in an interesting solution that will surprise me. But that's kind of why I'm working on so many at a time, that I'm not getting too fussy about one. I'm just like making the top and then kind of letting it marinate and working on other things until it really is talking to me. And this one, the screen is a tiny bit blown out. It's a little hard to see. This one is entirely made out of feed sack fabric. Kimberly and I went to the Asheville Quilt Show and found this like angel vendor who was selling feed sack fabric and like not marked up. Like it was like appropriately priced, but also like she was pricing to sell. And this, it was first the butter yellow fabric that spoke to me. It is the most beautiful color. It's like, I mean, I'm not trying, I am like nostalgic in nature, but I'm not trying to necessarily overly glamorize this fabric, but it is the fabric of time. And it doesn't feel like anything else I've ever used before. And part of what I loved about this, especially the cream, was that it still had the text on it, which I've never used text in my practice. It actually kind of terrifies me. But as I was playing with the textile, I noticed I love doing top stitch pleats. Like they have definitely become like a signature of mine, I would say. And I was pinching the fabric to see what a pleat would look like. And I was able to fully disguise the text into a line of shapes. But what was so magical was that if you lifted it up, you still were fully able to read the text. Because I wanted to be really thoughtful about my cuts. Like normally I'm not thinking about my cuts. I'm just like going for it and sewing blocks and like cutting up the blocks and putting them back together. It's like very loose and very free. But this one was a very slow make for me. Like it was a lot of sitting and, oh, is that the right move? Like, I don't know. Are these working together? It also was a fixed puzzle. So like what I had is what I got. There's nothing else. And I wanted to use every single scrap that I had from, it was 3 feed sacks, the yellow cream, and this, when I was looking at it in the show, it looked very pink to me. And as soon as I put it next to the yellow, it turned very lavender in like the best way. This one, I know exactly how I'm going to quilt it. This one will be hand quilted, and I'm going to follow the direction of the pleats, not in any sort of like pattern or organized. Like it'll be very loose and more like an intuitive drawing, if you will. But I'm gonna quilt it in like, it's like almost, it's variegated thread that goes from like almost olive black to black. So this one will end up getting a lot of contrast through like tiny little stitches, which I'm really excited to see this one transform. And I think I'm going to start working on this one before this. And I think between the two, I'll get some resolution.
That's so exciting. Thank you for sharing the behind the scenes with us. I just have a few more questions for you. I really want to ask you who you're looking at in terms of inspiration, whether that's other artists or writers or movies. Yeah, what's like filling up your vision board?
Oh my gosh, it's always changing. I mean, I think some of the foundational people are like Ava Hessa, always. Um, Rachel White Reed, always. Um, like truly anonymous quilters, like is specifically from unconventional and unexpected quilts under the radar. It is like there's so many quilts in that book that like haunt me at night. Like I think about them all the time. That's a huge source of inspiration. And also just like thinking about like these like lost quilts that like don't have a home or were never finished. I don't know. They always keep me inspired. I mean, like you can't be an improv quilter and not be influenced by G's Bend. I mean, like the greatest quilters to ever exist, in my opinion, like just so loose, so free, fearless. Like they're fearless quilts. And I want my quilts to be like even a fraction as fearless as theirs are. Um, I would say Al Taylor, I love his work, his sense of humor and levity, and how he's like bouncing in between drawing and sculpture and printmaking and like installation work. I mean, so seamlessly, like his language is so clear. I mean, and that goes for Martin Puryear too. Like I love Martin Puryear, have like loved him since college, and like his form, the elegance, how he's also like referring to like self portraiture in abstraction really speaks to me. Sally Mann has been one that's like come like full force and at the right time. I mean, I've admired her visual work forever, but read her memoir Hold Still, and it has kind of like flipped my world upside down. I mean, I grew up in the South and really denied that for a long time, and it has only been, I mean, truly since reading this book that it really has made me look at my relationship to the South. Both of my parents are from like up north in the middle of nowhere, tippy top of Wisconsin. And I always said like, but I'm like from Wisconsin, but I was not at all. And I went to school in Chicago and like really denied that I was homesick, like desperately homesick for the South. And it was like truly reading her memoir and talking about, you know, some similar experiences that she had, that I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, that's me. It's given me a lot to think about. And she talks about like, I don't know, Southern artists in a general, but also very specific way that I could not relate to more.
Yeah, that's such a great list. Thank you for sharing those. I really like that the majority of these artists that you just mentioned are not actually textiles people or quilt makers. I feel like that really speaks to kind of your interdisciplinary sensibility and how you're able to filter all of these different interests into what you're doing at that moment, which is right now 6 quilts that you're working on. What do you think makes a great quilt? I know that's a really hard question, but I want to ask you what you think about that question.
I love this question. And it's one that it kind of talking about, a rough outline of what we wanted to discuss today. That's one of a couple that I have wanted to mull over. It's such a subjective question. I mean, there's so many great quilts. And now, I'm seeing a whole new generation, our age and younger, and the ones before us that it's a very engaged community, and there's so many beautiful quilts. But personal taste, I'm always going to lean to hand quilt. As I'm going to museums or walking around quilt shows, the ones that pull me in, that make me walk in closer, it's always a hand quilt. And it's the texture. It's that texture. It's that sensitivity, like the cloth, there's nothing that makes cloth look like that other than hand quilting. So that's a check for me. And the rest, kind of what I'm looking for is, I feel like I see a lot of, all types of quilts where the quilting is almost in opposition to the quilt top. Like they're kind of fighting against each other. What I really love is when the quilting is still a statement. Like I love a colored thread, but it is like responding to and incorporated into the composition. I love color and color relationships. So I'm always looking for something that's like a bit unexpected. That's going to make me be like, oh my God, you can put those colors together. Like I would have no idea. So I would say hand quilting, and that, the top is in harmony with the quilting. And yeah, color. Love color.
Yeah, I think those are all really good answers. I'm also a sucker for hand quilting. This is the last question that I have prepared, unless you want to talk about something else after. But what, in your opinion, makes a quilt appropriate for a museum or a special collection?
I love this question. And in watching some of these other interviews, I heard this one asked a lot. And there are a lot of really interesting answers. I was so curious that I brought it up this weekend when I was amongst other gallerists. And I actually spoke to our director at Blue Spiral, Michael, about this, because he's heavily involved in Black Mountain College Museum and collections. And I was like, well, he's a part of this. So what makes it appropriate? And he had an incredibly political answer that I would love to share, but also would kind of like to talk about it further. What he said was that it will fit within the collection as long as the object aligns with the mission of the collection. So whoever is looking to acquire this work, what exactly are they looking for? How broad are those terms? Like, it's different collection to collection. However, what I'm hoping to see is at every single gallery in this country and worldwide, there is at least one textile artist represented, like between weavers, quilters, felters. Like I am seeing more quilts in the gallery world, but I would like to see even more. And I mean, speaking about quilt institutions specifically, I just recently went to the National Quilt Museum, which was a fabulous experience. And I got to see Carol Harris's breathtaking solo exhibition there. But if it wouldn't have been for her beautiful exhibition, I only saw less than 5 hand quilts. And that had a really profound effect on me. And I kind of experienced the same thing at the Asheville Quilt Show. Like I went the year before and saw a substantial amount of hand quilts and didn't really see that much this year. So, but I know there's so many hand quilters out there. So I'm looking out for us, and I think we should be in every collection.
I love that answer. Casey, thank you so much for answering all these questions so authentically and genuinely. Is there anything else that you think we missed that you want to talk about before we log off?
Well, the last thing that I'll say is that I recently have started working back into a quilt top, and it's called Overlook, and I had displayed it in a gallery, and it was a quilt top stretched around a stretcher bar. And I know you and I were going to a bunch of shows where we were seeing these stretched textiles, and we were like, oh, this is so cool. I like what this is doing. And at the moment, like this was back, let's say maybe January or February of this year, I was really thinking about my relationship to quilting and does it always have to be a quilt? Could it just be a top that's stretched? And it's taken me all this time to really consider it. But I'm really excited to say that I took it off the stretcher bar and am quilting it because, yeah, for me, it does have to be a quilt. I want it to be an object. And I'm looking for the transformation of the cloth that only you can get from quilting. And how it relates to sculpture. Like if something is stretched to a stretcher bar, it's kind of inescapable that you're not going to talk about painting at some point. And while I love painting and painters, I'm a sculptor. So it's got to be a quilt.
Yeah, I love how you said that, the transformation of cloth that you're really looking for. And yeah, I think that that really does speak to kind of the sculptural element of your quilted objects because you're thinking about seeing them in the round, you're thinking about suspending them. So yeah, I'm excited that you've come to that conclusion too. I think that's really pretty profound. Well, thank you so much, Casey, for sharing your practice, and thanks everyone for joining us. And that's it for this Quilters Save Our Stories program.
Kimberly couldn't be here live. She was traveling, but thank you so much to Kimberly for being an amazing interviewer. And I'd like to welcome Casey back for a short Q&A. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm excited to ask some of these questions that have popped up in the Q&A box. And I do want to add that if you'd like to revisit this interview, it'll be added to the collection of the Library of Congress's American Folklife Center and the University of Kentucky's Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History, and also online on our website shortly as a audio recording that you can jump to through thematic sections. So if you want to revisit it, you are welcome to do that soon when it's on our website. But first, we have a couple questions. We'll start with a quick one from Eleanor, who wanted to know where your next show is at, I think, Converse College, or did I get that right? Will you say a little bit about it?
Yes, hello everyone. So my upcoming solo exhibition is at Converse University in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The opening is going to be on February 1st, and I will be giving an artist talk. I don't know what time yet, but I will be giving an artist talk before the opening.
Cool. Well, if any of you are in the Spartanburg area or want to get to the Spartanburg area, check it out. And Deb has a question about the mind-body challenge and the focus on the somatic experience of hand quilting and the physical experience of hand quilting, and also about the slow approach. Like, what do you feel like the benefits are of going slow and of hand quilting, which is something you're really passionate about? And people are always saying it's dying. I don't know that I believe that, but it's getting there, maybe.
Oh my gosh, well, it just can't die. I won't let it.
Keep it alive.
Yes, and everyone try it if you haven't. Gosh, I mean, there's a lot to say about that, but I know for me, kind of like I said in the interview, my life, like between my job and life at home is like more fast-paced than my natural rhythm. I think I realized this through the shutdown and everything slowing down, that like my natural rhythm is a little bit slow, not a little bit, a lot slower than my life is. And hand quilting like gets me there to that level of presence, and just looking at it stitch by stitch, stacking those stitches and like inch by inch, just moving along, particularly when the stitching is very, like, just as improvisational as the top. Like, unless it's pretty rare nowadays that I'll have like a map for a stitch composition that I'm going to execute on the cloth. Mostly I'm responding to however I sewed it and kind of rediscovering it through hand quilting. I mean, I think there's so many benefits. I mean, but also I'm like a very obsessive soul. So what I find I have a hard time with is like stopping, like stopping and like doing hand stretch breaks, or like just like looking out the window for a little bit, because like I love to hyper fixate. Yeah. I don't know if I touched all points of that question, but
I think that's probably something that a lot of quilters have in common, is once they're going, it can be really hard to stop, because you get so absorbed in that world and that tiny point of focus. But yeah, I do think everyone, even if you think you're not a hand quilter, give it a try.
yes.
Why not? Well, your sort of day job, or you wear many hats, but one of them is that you work in a gallery. And I'm curious if you would talk a little bit. I know a lot of quilters are interested in having work in a gallery setting, but might feel a little intimidated because there's not as many quilts as I know that you would like to see and I would like to see in those settings. Do you have any tips as someone who works there and is in that world, for artists who are kind of exploring that?
Yes, absolutely. So first, I mean, like, just kind of first and foremost, just like put your work out there, like through Instagram, but also like on a website. And I know you all at the Quilt Alliance do such great advocacy about like documenting your quilts. Like preferably as a gallerist, like I do want to see a white background behind your quilt so that you can fully see the color and the edges. But a lot of galleries do have an open submission policy, and at Blue Spiral we also have an open submission policy, and have a history. The gallery has been in business for 33 years, and we have been selling textiles at some capacity for that length of time. Is it as much as our painting sales? No, but it is a growing collector basis, which is really exciting. And like, there are more and more galleries I'm seeing that are in search of entirely textile shows. So we, like next year, I curated an exhibition that's called Common Thread. It'll be at Blue Spiral from September to October of 2024. And everything in the show is textiles. It's on the main level. There's like 23 artists. It's a big show. Super exciting. And so we're considering textiles in that realm, but also to kind of round out other group shows. So say we have 8 artists in a show, 1 or 2 of them might be a textile artist. And that's becoming like more and more a part of like our rhythm of curation. And, you know, that has like a little bit to do with me, but also like our curatorial team is also really interested in textiles, and our collectors and audience are as well. So really look into the submission policies. And my director and I always say this, like being with a gallery is like being in a marriage. Like you have to really make sure that you're a good fit for each other. And that takes a lot of research and kind of being ruthlessly honest with yourself, like if they are a good fit, because I mean, I think there's a fit for everyone, but you just have to find it.
That's great advice in life and in gallery hunting. That's inspiring. And I'm glad to hear that I have noticed a growing movement when I go see art. I'm like, oh, this is, you know, like I'm always happy to see more textiles. So it's exciting. We have one more question, which is also touches on your sort of interdisciplinary work. Before we started the Zoom call, we were chatting a little bit, and you said you recently sold a quilt and you were giving it a big squeeze before you sent it off. And Amy Milne asked, do you feel the same way about your ceramics? And you said maybe a little bit, you can talk a little bit about how you feel about both those work, but I'm also just curious about how your process differs when you sit down to make a quilt and you sit down to make ceramic piece or a different kind of sculptural piece.
Yeah, there's always crossover, like no matter what I'm touching or working on, they all lead and bleed into each other. Quilts are something special because gosh, there's so many reasons, but I mean, they're so soft, you can squish them. I mean, they are a lot of the time like draped over me as I'm working on them. Like I love that level of intimacy. And I mean, I had talked in my interview about how I kind of started with textiles from wanting to sew clothes for myself. But also I think a large part of that was I also was working with a lot of clay at the time and working primarily functionally with clay. So making like tableware, a lot of plates, cups, like things that were very meant for the home and like kind of engaged the designer in me. And like, there's just, clay is humbling. Like you can do everything right, everything. And there can still be something that could go wrong at any turn. Like just because you make it through the first fire, like you're not out of the dark, like something weird could happen in the next fire and it's like ruined. And there was something so appealing to me about like the pick it up and put it down of textiles. Like I knew I could always come back to it, that it wasn't going to change on me unless I wanted to make a radical change. It also like presented the opportunity with scale, which I had started to push in my like works on paper practice. Like I made a quilt size woodblock print that was basically a blanket really. And like I'm a framer too. I did that like professionally before working at the gallery and did it here for a period of time, but like framing it, it was like 55 by 70 something. It was crazy. And hugely, it was in this huge shadow box frame. It was super challenging. And like you can just like get that big and like have no issues with quilts. Like you don't have to I do frame my tiny quilts, but like with the big ones, I mean, you can just like let them be. And kind of wrapping back around to ceramics, like with functional, it definitely engages the designer in me, which I'm kind of no longer, I'm not really looking to activate that. Like that person is there for like an assist if I need it, but I don't want that person to be like in the driver's seat or like that voice in my head. So kind of prompted by this conversation that I had had with Kimberly, I had thought about like, because something I said in this interview was like, quilts are sculpture. And I was like, okay, well, how does that fit within like the art historical context? I was looking up like the traditional definition of sculpture, and it said through Google that if it is sculpture, it has to be 3D and hard. So like stone, wood, metal, ceramic. And I was like, well, but it's not soft sculpture. So then it just falls under a textiles umbrella. I'm still kind of chewing on it, but now I'm like, well, I want to make hard sculpture to go with what I also consider my sculpture, my quilts.
Ooh, that's exciting. Well, we'll keep us posted. I'm curious about how that turns out. So
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much, Casey. We could ask a bunch more questions, but thank you so much for joining us and for doing this interview. I encourage folks to follow you online and look you up. But yeah, thank you again. And I'll turn it over to Lucy in just a second. I have one quick note to say that if you find yourself learning from and inspired by these interviews, like Casey's interview, I want to point out an opportunity that's happening now, which is the Artist James QSOS Scholars Program. This is a call for proposals for projects that use the QSOS Interview Archive, which is our collection of more than 1,200 interviews with quilt makers to inspire any kind of project. We're defining scholar very broadly. It doesn't have to be a purely academic project. It could be an artistic work, a multimedia project, textile work, a lesson plan. And we're looking for basically anyone interested in exploring the interviews and showing how they can be used in a creative and inspiring way. So 2 selected scholars will share their projects online and in a Textile Talk next year. So if you've ever wanted to be on the other side of the camera at a Textile Talk, this is a great opportunity and also a chance to spend some quality time with this amazing collection of interviews and amazing quilters like Casey. So thanks again. I'm turning it over to Lucy now to share a message from our sponsors, but thanks for joining us.